Hey there, rugby fans. Welcome to another great episode here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. A quick reminder, my name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside the familiar faces of Rob, the Hammer Hammerschmidt, and beside him, of course, the big guy, that's Scott Ferrara. And joining us here as the super fan for the Free Jacks, we have Phil Harris, who recently started the Jacks Rangers podcast. Phil, welcome to the show, my friend.
Huzzah, boys. Ready to get it. Let's ride, baby. Woo!
I like that energy, my friend. I like it a lot.
Especially because it irritates Scott.
Right. Terrible. Even more so. 1 point for Phil right away.
That was for you, big guy.
We're coming out hot, right? Yeah. But more importantly, we're here to be able to debate the topic at hand. And as you know, as fans of the Rugby Rant podcast show, this is the rugby debate show where we put ourselves and our guests to the test to be able to debate the topics that have been chosen by you as the fan. And what came out top on the poll here, of course, you can find that on the MLR Fan Zone, is whether referees should be allowed to use the Jumbotron or any equipment available to them in the replacing the TMO. So should they be using this type of technology when available, as it was recently made clearly obvious that this is now something we have to talk about because of the Giltini's game, where I believe his name was Derek Somers, the referee, used the Jumbotron and recalled back the action from a disallowed try because of a knock-on from John Ryberg when grounding the ball. And it became quite a controversial point on social media. So we have gathered our team here to be able to debate that topic and how it works.
A point, by the way, brought up by my progeny, Preston Hammerschmidt. Shout out to him because he's the one that posted on social media first and got the conversation started. That's my boy.
Rob's favorite son, right there. Rob's
yeah,
no, I love them both.
All right, so and that's true, right? That's nice to be able to know that we have that type of fan interaction, and these are the compelling arguments that drive us on the show. So driving that argument here is it's very important that people understand how does it work. So once again, a quick reminder for those of you, if you're not yet familiar with how it works here on the Rugby Rant and this debate format, each person on screen is given the opportunity to be able to debate the topic at hand with 2 minutes available to them. Should they go over their 2 minutes, will be awarded a yellow card. That is their first infringement. Should they continue to be able to go over their time, there you see Rob and Scott with their own yellow cards. I don't know why me as a referee, I don't have one. It's here somewhere.
Low budget.
But nevertheless,
his wife forgot to go to the store and buy the cheese.
Right. I got the wine though. But however, if you go over that 2 minutes, you're going to be awarded the red and you will potentially be out for another segment. So, gentlemen, with understanding the rules, understanding how, of course, you can break them too, we're going to give the floor to our guests to be able to rant
Ty,
this topic at hand.
Before we do that, we have to talk about something. Rob, what kind of hoodie are you wearing? Because you look like a floating head there. Oh, Houston Sabercats. Listen, I got to be honest, guys. You know, shopmlr.com has this military appreciation gear. Rob's showing you the Houston Sabercats hoodie. I got all the merch, all the Rooney merch. I actually bought 2 of the 3/4 length baseball shirts, Rooney Military Appreciation, and that's on shopmlr.com, powered by the Rugby Shop. It's special edition stuff for Memorial Day. Order now all your military appreciation gear because the supplies won't last. So you got to order it now on shopmlr.com, powered by the Rugby Shop.
Excellent. Thanks for that reminder. What we do is always possible with the help of good partners. So let's take the opportunity to dive into the action here as we turn our attention and the microphone over to Phil Harris. Tell us what you think about this talk about using Jumbotron or other technology to help the referees. And your 2 minutes start now.
I have a written statement, gentlemen. Insert Jeopardy music here. Ha ha ha. Do you ever watch a rugby match and have the urge to check your phone? Even the most diehard fans can find opportunities to check out of a game mentally for a couple of seconds. For the endless scrum resets or easy conversions, now imagine that you're a brand new viewer that stumbled upon rugby on their TV dial, hungover, looking for a Bruins game on a Saturday afternoon. Shout out to Ross. That really happened. That's a true story. If you tuned in at that right moment as Joe American, you might see the screen sideways and say, "What the heck is this crap?" and immediately turn the channel. And MLR has lost a potential fan, maybe forever. The law changes that have been implemented in MLR are to create less downtime on screen and showcase rugby as a fast-paced, bone-crunching sport that we all know and love. Now, don't get me wrong, we have seen some questionable grounding calls in the past few weeks that highlight the possibility for TMO to be needed. But I will say this, no one wants to be looking at an idle pink-clad referee staring at a big screen for answers for too long. It's boring and it takes away from the action on the pitch. There's some examples nearby in the saturated sports market that is America that can show us the way, okay? How about one TMO challenge per game per team, and the TMO has to have a review clock, okay, that lasts 60 seconds, just like our shiny new kick clock. So to answer the question, yes, I think it is a thing that MLR should have, but it better be rare and it better be fast.
Great. I like that. So it's the first time we've ever had a written response. I appreciate the homework being done. I really
Are you an attorney by trade?
There. I think Phil just gets a point for being prepared more than any other guest ever. So right off the bat, I think you've got 2 points. One because you're against Rooney, and so Phil's taking a BS here. Lead. All right. But more to the point, let's drive home some of these key premises in your argument, which is, you could lose a potential fan if you're dragging these moments out, right? Mm-hmm. It's too similar or dissimilar to other sports, and also too similar to other sports that fans of rugby criticize, right? So it's interesting. So I guess if I had to sum it up and help me be able to try to drive home the singular thought here. Is it that you feel that this would just be an unnecessary delay? And if we have to include it, there are definitely better ways to do it, as you mentioned. Is that kind of the core of your rant?
So the written statement obviously is very long, but I mean, in the beginning there, I just wanted to make people aware that I think that certain sports take too long. Right. And you could lose fans in that process. So I am for the TMO. I just think it should be a limited challenge opportunity for a team to do throughout a game, and there should be a clock that's counting down that the review can get
for all the same reasons they introduced the kick clock is the same reason that they should, if they do choose to go in that direction, limit the time that it can be used and how often it can be used, so we don't end up with unnecessary delays in the game, which is kind of counterproductive to what all these law variations have tried to implement. So I get you. So it's almost counterintuitive to be able to do that. I get that. Okay, cool. So let's swing it over to Scott Ferrara. Of course, let's hear what the weather's like there.
Let's get hot, baby. It's always hot in New York. Doesn't matter what time of year it is. Anyway, I disagree. I think right now at this stage in the game, using the Jumbotron to either correct the call or to influence your call is incorrect, because every facility does not have a Jumbotron. Every facility, which is the reason why the MLR does not have TMO. It has nothing to do with cost or anything to that nature to the league. But now with a lot of teams scrambling around to find a place to play, I mean, look at San Diego. They played in Vegas. They played a home game in LA. They played a home game in Chula Vista. And in June, they're going to be back at Torero. They've played at 4 different places. And granted, some of those places could have had TMO setups. Not all of them do. Rooney playing at Cochrane Stadium can't have a TMO setup. And even when they were at MCU Park, they didn't have that capability because that building's not set up for it. So I think using the Jumbotron right now is not the right way to go. It was obvious on screen that the official did that, and, it is what it is. If you look at the other teams that do use TMO or replays, NHL calls a central office, and that takes forever, like Phil was saying. NFL can watch as many replays as they want, apparently, because that takes forever. So I do agree, if we go to a TMO, it should be sparingly used. However they want to figure that out, maybe the time limit is the best thing to do it. But right now we're talking about the Jumbotron, and honestly, I don't think we should be using it. And let's be honest, most home teams are going to show the replays they want to show. So who's controlling the replay? So now the official is looking at a replay controlled by a producer who, one, how much rugby experience do they have? So what are they really showing? What angles are they showing? And two, if that producer is a fan of a certain team, nobody would know. How many times are they going to show away replays. It just happened to be that it was an away replayed show, right, Rob? If you can correct me if I'm wrong, that picked up this particular one. But I mean, how many times is that going to happen? So I don't think it should be used.
Right. So again, it's inconsistency across the league that one team may have the capabilities, but another may not. So is it right to be able to use these as your tools? So this is kind of the important question that we're trying to be able to get down to the heart of the matter. And if we are trying to dig into the heart of the matter, Phil had brought up the reference to TMO. Now, I don't think anybody would disagree the importance of TMO, right? We need to eventually be at this point because it's evident in professional sports, in almost every professional sport, there is some sort of revision that you can do, right? We're just not there because we don't have the capabilities. And Scott had pointed out, it's because not every team is in the same position. I personally have had experience at Infinity Park with Rugby Town USA, of course, the home to the former Colorado Raptors, and they were fortunate to have an amazing big screen. And I, as the announcer, often was encouraged to be able to go, and let's take a look at the replay on the big screen, right? Why? Because the referee would look over his shoulder, look at it, and while it wasn't necessarily always going to influence their decision, it was there, and our role was to encourage people to look at the screen. So
I have a question, Ty. Is that how the Raptors beat Toronto in 2021?
Pass. No, that was a really good end. It was a 3-point difference in the end, I think it was. And besides the point, while it may not have been used all the time, and while it certainly wasn't policy that it would be used, it was almost, you felt as if if it happened to be, fine, but they weren't going out of their way to try and make this the policy or try and influence it. I didn't feel that way, but as an announcer, I was always going to say, let's turn our attention to the big screen to check that in more detail or something to that reference. Why wouldn't an announcer do that? Right, for every fan to be able to see that action one more time. But what happens when they do? Right. And then they see a drop moment with like Ryberg against the Giltinis. So is it fair for fans to be understandably upset on one side and other fans on the other side to go, oh, get over it? Yeah, that's going to happen. With that in mind, let's swing it over to Rob to hear his thoughts.
So, I'm when I saw this question, I was really torn, especially as I saw a lot of the comments on social media, because I think a lot of people make some very good points. And you see Scott and Phil both have kind of a little bit of a different perspective on this. I thought of it from an official standpoint because, as some people know who watch so consistently, I am an official. I've officiated wrestling. And one of the things that I know as an official, your number one goal is to get the call right. You don't ever want to be in a position as an official to determine the outcome of the match, right? If a try is knocked or a supported try is knocked on, and you call a try, and later on you go back and people are clamoring for your head because you missed it. That's the worst feeling ever, that you had an impact on the outcome of the game rather than letting the players dictate the outcome of the game. So, obviously it makes a case for TMO. But as a fan, I think I struggle with the inconsistency that something like this event brings, right? Because in most of the stadiums, you would never have gotten that call because you just don't have the camera angles, number one.
Right.
Number two, you don't have the replay ability. Even on some of the best stadiums in the league, they don't have this. Right. So what I struggle with is the luck of the draw. You happen to be playing, you're watching as a fan a game in your home stadium, and because it's at SoFi, it gets phenomenal camera angles, and you get your team is the beneficiary potentially of this, of an official seeing it in the Jumbotron. On the other hand, the next week, your team could be the loser of this because the team you're playing knocked it on. There's a replay on TV. It shows a clear knock on, but the official doesn't get the opportunity to see it because, of course, there's no Jumbotron. And so that inconsistency is what I struggle with. And that's why, as a fan, you want that consistency. You don't want to have the fan at home see something very different from the fan in the seats. And that's what can potentially happen if you use the Jumbotron in some cases and you don't use it in others, right? So I guess I land at this place. We just need to be consistent. Officials need to be able to have the ability to use it or not use it, but let's be consistent until we find something consistently across.
And I don't think that I have seen any sort of official stance being revealed. I mean, Derek Somers was in a very difficult position. Let's just recognize this, as you pointed out, Rob, and I think it's worth revisiting. I mean, you were kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? There was no upside for him really, but except to be able to go back to his roots and his core function as officiating and refereeing is I got to get the calls right. So as a referee, I kind of want to be able to commend him and compliment him for having the guts to be able to go and say, hang on, I made a mistake, right? First up. And I need to correct that mistake and I need to get it right, because just to boil it down and make it very simple so people recognize what I'm trying to illustrate here, if he had left that call, people would have been crying out in rage about it, right? And he unfortunately would have been classified as the worst referee in MLR, right? Because he got one thing wrong.
I'm sorry for laughing, but that's like, it's like, oh my God, the guy called offsides on us. He's the he doesn't know the laws. He's the most terrible.
The panic stations that every fan hits that button, right? All at the same time. They're all hitting social media, calling for his lynching. But it's difficult to be able to be in that role. I personally know I would not be a great officiator because I don't know I can make those calls correctly 100% of the time. No one can do it 100% of the time, right? It's an unrealistic expectation we hold them to. So what is the expectation? And this is more to Rob's point. We need to find what is that expectation. Are they expected to use this technology if it's available, or are they expected to be able to go with the grassroots style refereeing and make the call as they see it? So let's put them to the table.
Yeah, that's where I would land on this, is that the league needs to come out with a policy, and that's a policy that would be dictated to all the facilities. Like, we're not gonna show this particular replay, or we're not gonna put this up on the Jumbotron or something of that nature, just simply to create that consistency amongst all the pitches.
Well, you have to put it up on the Jumbotron. Like I said, if you're the in-stadium fan, how do you have the access to review that, or to see it again, not to review it? So it's a difficult position. I mean, I don't have the perfect answer, right?
Well, I mean, again, it goes back to what do the stadiums have? And if the stadiums that they're regularly playing in don't have a Jumbotron, there's nothing to put up. I mean, I go back to, before hockey had the replay call into Toronto, before NFL had challenges. I mean, we're all of that age when we went to those games. The referee would make a call. The call would be a bad call. He missed something, or something went a different way. They'd show it on the replay booth. Everybody would boo, and then that was still the call. So I mean, right now, and even now with the capability of replay, they still don't get the calls right. So regardless if you have TMO or not, you still might not be getting it right. So my point is, you have to go to the lowest common denominator of what the pitch's availability is and capability is, and use that one.
Okay.
Now again, there might be, but we don't know. But we don't know if there's a policy that the MLR has for this. There might be one. It's just not public.
Well, and that's my point. There should be one, and it should be, don't put the referees in bad positions, right? Because they're already under the microscope right now as it is. Obviously, they brought in some referees in bad positions for that very reason.
I mean, look, okay. So here's the in a nutshell what happened. A call was to, they reversed the try because of a call that became. Let me rephrase this. A try was reversed because it was obvious that there was a knock-on when scoring a try for the Giltinis. If you're not familiar with it, go and check it out. Hopefully we'll have some footage to be able to share. But more important to the point is that one try wasn't a defining moment in the scoreline. It still ended up being quite a large difference between the two. But what it could have been, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing. It wasn't that obvious to the official or to the AR. So it was only obvious when you saw the replay.
Because of that, the million angles that they have available to them.
I know, but so maybe, so maybe Rob's right. Maybe the AR and the official should have been in a better position to watch it. And I think that's something that MLR officials, I don't think the AR should be proactive in a call, but I do think some MLR officials don't use their AR as effectively as they can.
Right. I agree with that for sure.
Right.
I mean, if they're watching it, you should at least get their point of view before you make you finish up your thought. If you're 50-50 on something, ask the AR.
Well, and that's a credit to a referee. I enjoy a referee who will call somebody in. Scott Green's an example of somebody who does this fairly often, I've observed. But I don't know if I see all doing it as frequently. And I guess, and this is one of the elements that's been discussed from even preseason, is raising the bar in terms of the skill level, the knowledge level, and of course, the accuracy of referees. Jonathan Kaplan, who's an international referee at the highest level for many, many years, was brought on as a consultant to be able to help guide this endeavor to be able to raise the quality. So perhaps it begs the question is, if these standards are being set and they are communicated, why is it not being communicated to fans? And I'm not asking you to kind of lay out every single rule and everything. It's going to be too confusing. But in this occasion, in this circumstance, where fans are obviously talking about it, perhaps there's an opportunity to be able to educate them too.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's sometimes MLR doesn't think about their public persona at certain times with the way they communicate rule changes or teams dropping out or season ending things, or whatever it is. And I think it's just, you can add that to the list of, I would call, I wouldn't call it a bungle, but I would say specifically this week that you had this situation and there was buzz about it. Maybe they should have been a little proactive and say, hey, this is actually what we're trying to do for the officials in that situation.
Yeah, because you have to assume that this is now going to set a precedent in some regard, right? Now, will other referees feel similar? But I also want to rewind to, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but at the time, it was caught on the microphone from the referee saying, I don't know who was approached him. I don't know if it was Cottrell or who it may have been that approached the referee at the time. And he's like, well, what do you mean? What's going on? And it was, Gito was lined up for the kick. And they're like, well, why are we calling this play back? And he called everybody back from the other side of the field, right? And then you as a fan were kind of lost a little bit in between. The commentators kind of narrated it for you. But what I heard come from the referee is like, look, man, there's 12 big screens around here. I could see that it was a knock on, right? So he did make it clear at that time to them. I just didn't see the part where the referee had spoken to one of the assistants. Did anybody else see that moment?
I mean, it might have happened. Maybe that's something that
I don't know.
TV didn't catch, but I didn't. I happened to not see it.
Same.
Yeah. Rob, did you see that?
No, and it's because they were playing the replay several times of the actual knock on.
Exactly.
Right? That's why you didn't catch
12 or 15 seconds. Yeah, that we didn't see.
12 or 15 seconds where we're all left wondering what the heck is going on here, which direction is Summers going to go with this. Again, I think the biggest thing that the league needs to take away from this is to try not to put the officials in an unenviable situation in which they are determining the outcome of a game one way or the other. So they either need to find the resources to give officials the best opportunity to make those calls based upon what is allowed to be seen, whether it be in replay or whatever have you, or going back to a league office for, like Phil said, the league, one of the challenges that a coach or a captain can make, or they say, we're not going to, locations, you cannot show these replays in this situation because it puts our officials in a bad situation in which they cannot win. Right. Yeah. Or they, because if you take that out of the referee's hands and say referees are not allowed to look at the Jumbotron, it's against the league policy. Well, they're in a no-win situation too. So, they're trying to improve.
I mean, but that's, but that's also consistent. But that's also in the Big Four. They're told not to use the Jumbotron, so they don't do it. So, I mean, my point is, why isn't it an issue in the other sports? Because they have the option for a replay, I guess, in a call to Toronto or a call to challenge.
They have other means.
But before they did it, and they still were told not to do it. So, at that point, again, it comes down to capability. I think one thing we do need to talk about, and it kind of turned into this way online in the fan zone, was people are talking about referee communication in the broadcast. And I do notice that certain places, maybe it's dependent on the team, I don't know if they forget to turn up the referee's microphone sometimes, but there's obvious conversation that the referee's having with a player or with the AR, and the mics aren't up, and we know they're all mic'd. And I think that's just a growing pain of maybe some of these production guys not understanding the game as well as they could. But I think that should be a market point, is if you can't use the Jumbotron for the replay, when they're showing the replay of Ryberg knocking it on, the audio should have been, if Summers was talking to the AR, that's what should have been the audio and not the replay broadcast.
Right. So you're saying keep the mic on no matter what.
Yeah, that mic, if he had talked to him, he might not have, we're not sure. That mic should have definitely been hot to hear what he was saying.
Right. And none of us here can confirm whether there was that conversation for two reasons. One, the mic wasn't on and the video replay was just showing that moment again and again. So yes, I agree. I mean, I did hear some of it, but I didn't hear all of it. But that's one of the great things, is that you want to be able to kind of hear the referee's call. And to your point there, Scott, is this broadcast team was probably not used to a rugby product, right? And when a microphone is on for football, it's controlled through a different source. The umpire decides, I'm on now or not.
Yeah, I'm clicking on, I'm clicking off. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a completely different way of doing things. And that's probably just a growing pain, as you said. Will this be taken in, as a learning experience? I certainly hope, right? But, we can't almost talk about this conversation without bringing in, and we don't have to dwell on it too long, about that talk about, is it seriously time for the MLR to now bring in a form of the TMO, the third match official? And with all of what we have right now, there is a lot of inconsistency in the broadcast, things like that. Do you think it's possible? And if there was a version that could employ this in future, what would it look like? Let's start with Phil.
All right. So as I was saying earlier, let's keep it brief and rare. If it's going to occur, it needs to be a situation where it's like a try being scored and there's some questions. If there's a knock on, like what we're talking about, something very game changing, right? If points are going to be on the board and big points, then it needs to be something that can be reviewed by the team captain, perhaps like one per half per team, or maybe just one for the entire game.
Well, something that the captain can say about right there is already being employed by Super Rugby across actually a couple of different leagues, including the new Rainbow Cup. The Captain's Challenge is, I think, what they call it, right? And that captain has an opportunity to have one per game. Now, here's the interesting part, is should he be correct in challenging a play? So, for example, let's imagine it was Cottrell who said, hang on, or sorry, the other way around. Let's say Free Jacks, any suitable candidate, whatever they decide, is going to be the person to be able to challenge it. Okay, so they go and they challenge it. We think here's why. They review it. But again, it comes down to the review opportunity, right? Do we have the quality of the broadcast to be able to have that accuracy in the review? But let's just say if they are correct in their challenge, they get to keep their captain's challenge and use it again. If they're incorrect, they lose that challenge. And so it continues through the game. I think it's a pretty interesting prospect. But again, it doesn't happen without that parity in the league with the technology and the broadcast standard. Yeah. So how do we find a version closest to that with what we have right now? Or should we abandon that concept for now because we're just not there yet? Scott?
For example.
Oh, sorry. Phil, you can finish your thought.
Oh,
no,
sorry.
Phil, finish your thought.
Yeah, I know of a situation where SEC baseball doesn't use the actual jumbotrons that they have there in baseball. They actually take the umpires into the dugout. They put on headphones. They're not actually watching something. They're hearing from Birmingham or wherever the SEC headquarters is to let them know what what the call was and what the issue was, and then the person on the line there makes the call, I believe. So the referees are not looking at anything. They're just so this could be used if there's no jumbotron or something like that. You make a call into New York or wherever, Dallas, right, to let the headquarters make the call.
Yeah, that's currently what the NHL does. But I think what I would do is I would take Phil's point and amend it a little bit. Yeah. Dangerous play should always be reviewable, not just reviewable via captain's challenge. And then maybe that's something Phil just implied in his head because it's just normal. But I just want to point that's probably what would be done. Somebody did suggest, all scoring replays like they do in football. But here's the thing: an obstruction can go back from on the other side of the field to leave for a try. So now you're taking up that 4 to 5 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes to go back to look for it, and this, that, and the other thing. So I'm not sure that's the best way to go, but I think,
and that is one of the challenges with the captain's challenge. Excuse that there, but yeah, they have to sometimes. I watched it recently with the Stormers, and they had a captain's challenge a couple of times, and then they had to go back, and then you can hear them talking to the team. Oh, no, further, nope, a little bit forward, nope, yeah, that's the spot.
But here's the thing: if you're doing it just using the captain's challenge, it kind of condenses the amount of times you can do it. What I want to point out is you do have things like Mike Lash uses AR perfectly, and the Rooney match against LA. I forgot somebody got rung around by the neck. The match of fit the AR. I don't know if he just said dangerous play or whatever. Mike Lash stopped it immediately, spoke to the AR about it, and then got it situated. And again, it all happened in the span of 20 seconds.
That's what you want, I agree.
Yeah. And rugby, its appeal in the US market is that it's going to be a more free-flowing sport than some of its counterparts. So you don't really want to add these components that delay it. But yet you recognize their importance.
Right.
I guess, again, it comes back to that question, and I want to frame it again, and Rob can take us out on this segment with this final thought. Is MLR ready to be able to do a TMO of some sort of version, or are we just too early and we're not there yet and we got to be patient?
And I guess I'd say I don't think we're ready for TMO in terms of broadcasting, in terms of putting on the Jumbotron. Why not do something simplistic like what Phil's talking about, and just focus on the try itself, grounding, right? Because where you have the most consistent problems is with was a player inbounds when they grounded the ball, or was the ball knocked on when trying to ground the ball, right? Mm-hmm. And so you just take a camera in either end, right, or 2 cameras from either corner of both sides of the field, so 4 cameras, and they're linked into the headquarters, for the league or whatnot, and then you have an official that's there, that's like Kaplan, that's going to look at that evidence, and he's just going to report to the match official and say, foot was out of bounds, no try, or ball was grounded, try awarded, and they then communicate that.
Right.
I dangerous play, you're getting a lot more cameras to get the coverage. I agree with Scott that I think that would be a good idea. I just don't know in its infancy if you're going to start with that or eventually go to that point. I think the most significant part is, scoring opportunities. And you use your ARs as eyes in the field, as they should be used for things like dangerous play, like high tackles, or for, obstruction or something of that nature.
Right. I think that's pretty well thought out. And, in theory, it's possible because the broadcasting hub for Major League Rugby is in Austin, Texas, I believe. And where this is, many of the broadcasters will do their work remotely. And many of the fans at home will not actually realize that some of these guys are not even on site, given the conditions that we're under, right? Mm-hmm. So in theory, yes, it's possible. Do they have a feed to every single game? Absolutely. Is it real time? As close as it can be. Is there going to be a delay? Sure. Is it noticeable? Maybe. There's going to be some growing pains. Absolutely. But I think, if you could have that, I guess one of the stumbling blocks is it's going to add a lot more money and expenses. If you have to have an additional 4 cameras at every single game, yes, they don't have to be manned, but there's still equipment, right? And there's still 4 different feeds. So logistically, it is going to add a lot. I guess we have to think, how much value would it add? Right now that the MLR is footing the bill for every single bit of that broadcast expense, and of course providing it for free to all those that view it, it doesn't quite seem feasible to add more to that bill right now. But we recognize its importance. So let's swing back around to the original question. Are we in favor of referees in the absence of TMO using technology available in the stadiums where they are at? So let's just get a simple yes or no to round it off. Phil, tell us your final thought.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So from Scott?
Nope.
Nope. And Rob Hammerschmidt?
No.
That's 2 no's. And I don't know where I sit because this has been an interesting debate. But I do have to remind everybody who is watching this that if you like what we do here on the Rugby Rant podcast show, you can find us on social media at the handle at Rugby Rant Pod through all of our social media networks, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now more recently, TikTok, under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. For more great content, you can, of course, see us weekly on the Rugby Network as well. And you will see us there each and every Friday with a new Rugby Debate episode.
Rugby Coffee was born out of two passions: providing ethically sourced coffee, promoting the growth and development of rugby. By combining these two passions, the folks at Rugby Coffee see an opportunity to bring people together, and together we can make a difference. Rugby Coffee invests 10% of their profits into giving kids opportunities to play rugby and projects that help uplift communities. These endeavors have been transformational in many kids' lives and uplifted and empowered these communities. The boys at Rugby Coffee are taking pre-orders for their three distinct brews: Jouet Jouet, Champions Cup, and Crowd Favorite, which is a North American blend. Each brew has its own unique style and flavor. Get your brew and support youth rugby. A simple vision can be transformational. Rugby as a sport can inspire communities, bring hope, and provide opportunity. Rugby Coffee, it's not just a game, it's a way of life. Tighthead Brewing Company is Chicago's premier location to watch rugby and enjoy quality ales and lagers for all seasons. Located in Mundelein, Illinois, in the heart of Lake County, owner Bruce Durr and the Tighthead staff will ensure you are kept well hydrated so you don't miss a single scrum. Tighthead staff room is like the familiar rugby clubhouse in which friends and families can meet, socialize, and enjoy the action of every Major League Rugby derby that will electrify the 2021 season. The watch parties will happen every week throughout the season up to the Major League Rugby final on August 1st. Hey Chicago, when you want rugby, Tighthead Brewing Company will satisfy your thirst. Tighthead, it's worth more than a try.
Thank you, Rob, for reminding our viewers at home that, of course, Rugby Coffee, not only is it great to be able to get a good cup of coffee, but it's also nice to know that a piece of that goes to being able to grow rugby across the US and Canada, in particular with youth rugby. And that is pretty much our mission here on the show as well, is to be able to help rugby grow one fan at a time here on the Rugby Rant podcast show, where you can, of course, get more content from us weekly on TRN, the Rugby Network, and, of course, on our social media at the handle at Rugby Rant Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now TikTok more recently, again, under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod, where if you wanted to be able to catch the next segment of this particular episode, where we will be talking about the matchup between the Free Jacks and Rugby ATL from this past round's games in MLR, make sure that you follow us again on social media at the handle at Rugby Rant Pod, where you can see our game analysis from these guys on screen there. But before then, and before we head out from this episode, we have to be able to remind you who is the winner of this round. So I need to be able to tally the points in each debate. It is important to recognize that there is a winner, and we are going to crown that winner as Mr. Rob Hammerschmidt. You are our winner.
Score another one for Team Hammerschmidt. Not only does my boy Preston get 1 point for bringing up the topic on social media, but I finished the round out.
One of the few. They should start calling me the Cowboy because I've definitely scored more points than you in the rant. I'm just saying.
I'm impressed Scott didn't win.
Oh, well, you know, that's what makes it interesting. Each and every week, there's going to be a new battle and a new ranters on screen. So again, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe to us under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. For this occasion, on episode 51, it is Rob Hammerschmidt who takes the crown and takes the win. But who will it be next time around? My name is Ty Braga, the host for today's activities, alongside Rob the Hammerschmidt, Scott the Big Guy Ferrara, and of course Phil Harris from Jack's Rangers podcast. Make sure that you tune in on all the places you can find him and us under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you at the next. And we're back here on the Rugby Rant to be able to talk about rugby, of course, but more importantly, we're going to be doing our game analysis when it comes to the Free Jacks versus Rugby ATL from this past weekend's MLR action. Now, boys, obviously we know that this was going to be an interesting matchup down in the Snake Pit, of course, in Atlanta, home for the Rugby ATL organization, who on this occasion came out tops with a scoreline of 33-18. The Free Jacks, unfortunately, the loser on this one, and pushing Rugby ATL even further upward on the standings for their conference. So a particularly good result for Rugby ATL, but let's hear the thoughts, and we're going to hand it to our resident Free Jack. Here is Phil Harris, again from the Jack Rangers podcast show. Phil, tell us what you think.
Yeah, boys, not too great for the Free Jacks down there in hot Atlanta. My buddy Dave, who's kind of a co-host on a couple of my segments, his key to the game was to stop Atlanta, their mauls, and the first point scored was a maul try by Atlanta. So I thought, this is exactly what we didn't want to happen. We wanted to stop those, but unfortunately, it was just not our night. It was a tough result, unfortunately. I will say that we were in the game until the 71st minute. It was 19-18 was the scoreline. We were just down by 1 point. And then, unfortunately, we got 2 yellow cards after that for us. So lack of discipline strikes again for us, unfortunately. It's been a problem all year long. I think we're averaging more than a card a game. So that's got to get cleaned up. I mean, when you're in championship time like that and you get 2 yellow cards within a minute of each other and you're playing with 13 men to try to win the game, I mean, it's not easy to do, and you're just not going to get it done. It seemed like Atlanta had more fitness than us, unfortunately. Towards the end there, travel has a lot to do with this at times, especially when you're getting that late in the game, and they couldn't get it done, unfortunately, for us.
Yeah, and I like how you referenced the fact that it was a really competitive matchup with a 1 point difference really deep into the game. But yeah, discipline, obviously those 2 yellow cards in quick succession not only breaks your rhythm, but let's also recognize that that's about discipline, but that also took place in a really critical last 5 meters, defending and continuous infringements, because, in the defense for the referee, Free Jacks were warned several times, hey, you can't repeat this offense. But when you got to throw bodies on the line, you just do everything you can to stop it, right? So unfortunately, they paid for the price for it. Let's hear from Scott. What is your opening thoughts?
Well, I think unfortunately this match was indicative of what the Free Jacks have done in other matches where they get to a point where they're close the gap. So Atlanta I'd say in the first 35 minutes, I think the score was like really 19-6 ish before Barlow scores his try right before halftime to bring it to 19-13. So at that point, Free Jacks had scored enough to keep them tight, but they kind of let Atlanta go with the scoring. Free Jacks come in that second half and pretty much stopped them up until that 71st minute. So right. The Free Jacks defense had the plan to stop that free-flowing Atlanta offense, which is something that Rooney has done and other people have stifled as well. I guess they kind of figured out, how to not have those gaps. I mean, Atlanta, let's talk about Atlanta a bit. One of their biggest offensive threats is the Cowboy Mark O'Keefe, because they can open that hole and he can take off. He ends up scoring one late to put Rugby ATL up. So right. I think
he's been consistent game after game, though.
Yeah, he's been scoring, and you have guys like Ross Deacon scoring another try as the 8-man. Ross the Boss, my man. What interesting is Petzer has backed off some of the kicking. Interestingly enough, he was the league leader in points for the first 3 or 4 matches, and then they kind of, I think they're trying to let him think more about working that backline play and not focus on the kicking. But. Yeah. It's one of those things where, again, just ill discipline killed him. I mean, we saw it with Nola, we saw it with Rooney. This week the Eastern Conference.
It's kind of a trend across the league, though. Wouldn't you agree?
I don't know if it's a trend across the league because it like for Nola, it was one was a thrown punch, then the other one was accumulation of penalties. Rooney was speaking back to the referee, so it was all different infringements. Right. But I do think
is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a frustration, and I don't know the level of officiating that maybe players think is going on, when, to be honest, just, play above the referee. If you beat a team by 40 points, you can't say the referee blew the call.
Right.
But yeah, going back to it, it was just unfortunately a lack of discipline in the last 10 minutes. And then even ATL has a card 80 minutes in. Our boy, the Cowboy, gets a card for a dangerous tackle when he really didn't need to because the game was out of hand. Right. So, at that point, you should be making textbook tackles, although I know he did play 80 minutes. So maybe it was just a lack of concentration on his part.
Right. Momentary lapse. I mean, fatigue is certainly set in there. If you're playing 80 minutes, you've done pretty good. And then when you get to the 81st, sure, Great. Yep. We'll let you have that one. I mean, it's uncharacteristic for him. Let's say that. But I wanted to be able to focus on that discipline. So some of the stats that have been revealed post-game is the amount of penalties conceded. So Rugby ATL find themselves being the higher of the two with 17 against Free Jacks, 13 penalties conceded. Now, we also do know that in that process, 2 yellow cards were awarded to the Free Jacks, which threw them down to 13 men for the last 10 minutes. So we have to be able to think to ourselves, it was really a competitive game, and the Free Jacks was certainly in it until that moment. So, and they came in quick succession to one another. I think they were maybe like 2 or 3 minutes apart from each other. So
less than that.
Not even. I think it was less than a minute.
You might be right. Yeah, they were almost back to back. I mean, as close as you could possibly get. It was certainly the very next play. Let's say that. So yeah, it's devastating when you're at that time, and then just the momentum that's lost, and that boost that you should have had in that last 10 minutes was just ripped out from underneath you. But let's hear Rob Hammerschmidt's thoughts.
Sorry, gents, I feel like a broken record because week in, week out, I'm going back to penalties as being a constant Achilles heel for teams that are on the losing end of a match. I mean, when you look at some of the stat lines, actually ATL had conceded more penalties, but unfortunately, when you commit 2 yellows within that span of time, especially at a critical point in the match, it just becomes a hurdle that teams cannot overcome, and they just have to improve their discipline. The ATL had a more territory, but I don't always think territory is necessarily an indicator. But for me, indicators are lineouts won. The Free Jacks won that. The Free Jacks had more time possession. Carrying meters for me is a much bigger indicator than perhaps most any other stat, where they had 516 meters compared to 376, yet still were on the losing end. And so it kind of comes back to those critical penalties at a critical time in the match, and they just can't commit those, especially against ATL. ATL is an explosive team that we also know that they can protect their lead. Scott mentioned that Petzer didn't play kick as much, but we know he has a fabulous boot, and so he can do 2 things. Number one, he can get them out of dangerous territory when they're deep and they're defending inside their 20, 22. He can kick them out of trouble and get relieve that pressure. But when they get the beneficiary of a penalty inside the 50, maybe inside the 45 meters, we know he can, straight on slot that kick and keep the board ticking over. And so that's the danger of ATL. And we know they're a well scrummaging team too, that they're always going to be able to put their opponent under pressure because they have a lot of quality front rowers. So it's just a team that ATL is not a team that you can make mistakes against. It's just bottom line. Scott Lawrence is always well prepared. He always has his guys ready to go. And, they always know how they want to play, where they want to play, and what style they're going to play when they're facing an opposition. They're just too well prepared that you cannot make mistakes against them because they will break you.
And one particular interesting moment for me for me personally, the moment of the match that kind of gave you an indication that now the game had swiftly turned in the favor of Rugby ATL, and I'm going to refer to Petzer because his name's been thrown around a couple of times here. And while he traditionally has his strength at 10, he plays a great 12 and he plays a great 13, right? He's a physical player. We had the opportunity to interview him and we spoke about this, and he enjoys it because of that physicality. But when you said he's also got a great boot, there was one magical moment with a little chip over the top from a turnover ball against the Free Jacks that was passed out wide enough. He observed that they were on their attacking phase. So, the fullback was out of position. Wing wasn't playing deep. A little chip over the top popped up into the hands of Carlson, and under the post it was. And that kind of felt like, man, here's a team that has now been on the attack, putting good faces together, which was the Free Jacks at that time. And then that one moment that you made a mistake and they took the opportunity and they put points under the post for the automatic 7. That's the strength of a team to be able to flip on in a moment that you see from New Zealand, which is like no matter what the scoreline is, you never ever can count them out until that final whistle is played. And I think that was the moment of the match for me. Phil, was there a moment of the match for you?
I mean, ultimately, I just think the 2 yellow cards, it took us out of the game. That's the moment of the match for me. Right. Unfortunately, with the loss there with Free Jacks, I really enjoyed the kicking at the attacking kicking from Atlanta. They burned us twice. You're just referencing one of those. Right. That was pretty to see. I just go back to we had it all there for us. Yeah, with 71 minutes left, and you get 2 yellow cards and it just knocks us out of the game. That's the moment for me.
Yeah, I mean, really, it does. It breaks your rhythm completely, and it's demotivating almost, and it's very hard to be able to pick yourself up when you've gone 2 men down inside of a minute, right? Scott, did you have a moment of the match?
Honestly, I think it was the cards, because up until that it was a 1-point game,
right?
But I just want to go back real quickly to if you look at the Free Jacks record, 2 weeks ago it was a 4-point win against AG's, and AG's kind of whatever, their defense kind of shut down or didn't shut down the Free Jacks in the second half, so the Free Jacks took care of their business. You go back to NOLA, it was a loss to NOLA by 1 point. It was the week before it was a win against Utah by 1 point. But then you have these
matchups.
Yeah, you have these outliers of Free Jack wins, though, where Free Jack shut out the SaberCats and beat San Diego in LA. The Free Jacks have the firepower to do it. They just haven't been able to put it together. I mean, you swap that NOLA match for a win, and maybe you come away with a win against Atlanta without those 2 cards, and all of a sudden you're sitting at the top of the table. And if you hit any of those bonus points, now not only are you top of the table, you're top of the table by 2 extra wins plus 2 bonus points. I mean, we're talking about maybe a 10-point swing there, and that's just off of 3 matches.
Well, right now, as the table stands, Rugby ATL is at the top with 26 points, having taken this win. And the Eastern Conference, we mentioned it, before. There's a difference of, I think, only 5 points between the top and the bottom, right? So it really kind of still gives you the feel at this stage of the league.
6 points.
I think
6 points. 6 points, right? So more to my point is it can't be anybody's game still, right? I mean, everybody's kind of in the mix, as you pointed out there a moment ago, Scott. But you have to be able to also recognize Rugby ATL has been fortunate enough to play a lot of their home games already. How will they be on the road? And that's still yet to be determined. So yes, have they done the right thing and put points on the board when you got that home ground advantage? Absolutely. But the real test will come when you have to hit the road.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just looked at their schedule, and coming up, they're playing in Seattle. We know even in COVID with restricted fan access, Seattle is a very tough place to play. You're going across the continent. We know that's very difficult. They're going to be playing in NOLA, which is going to be a difficult matchup to play because we know the fans there will fill up the stands, and then they're going to be playing Rooney. Of course. And Rooney is going to be very tough.
Who right now are the giant slayers, right?
Absolutely. They're very tough as well. So, they have some tough string of matches coming up that might make it pretty difficult for them to remain amongst the top as they start to shift their schedule to more away matches than home matches.
Right. Well, I think that it's pretty clear that we all agree that this was Rugby ATL's game up until about that 72nd mark, right? Or should I say Free Jacks was in the game until then, but it certainly became the Rugby ATL matchup when those 2 yellow cards were awarded to them. And that's kind of the defining moment, without a doubt. It was still competitive rugby. You kind of had to feel up until that moment that it was still anybody's game. But Rugby ATL has somehow managed to be able to come up top on plenty of battles at home for them. They've had some tough matchups, and they deserve their position at the top of the log right now. Whether they hold that position will be defined by the next few weeks hitting the road. And we will be staying abreast with all of those challenges, and of course be highlighting each game each week here on the Rugby Rant, where you can like, follow, and subscribe to our content under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod for more great content. You can also find us weekly on the Rugby Network, and we will be launching new episodes, I believe, every Friday there. So whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, and of course also on TRN, you can find our content under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for giving us the time to be able to debate this at hand. Phil, you, of course, have been a great addition to this one, being the Free Jacks fan. I wanted to be able to hand the microphone to you, though. Do you have a shout-out, any special message you wanted to be able to share with those folks at home? And your opportunity is here.
I appreciate that. I just wanted to give a shout-out to our boy Mags, who is going to be on the podcast this week in episode 4. We've got a big rivalry week, of course. Scott, you're going to be on the podcast as well this week, so it's going to be great. I want to give a shout out to Dave, who's my co-host, Dave McVeigh of Yeti Poet Rugby. There's so many great Free Jacks fans out there. Spider, Doc, all those guys that have helped me out with the podcast. Scott as well, helping out. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Well, it's awesome to be able to have you here. And we love the fact that you are also doing your part to be able to grow rugby, because that's what it's about. We're all in it together, aren't we? And you know what? I'm quite surprised to be able to see. I mean, the highlight of your show so far must be to have a Rooney fan on a Free Jack show.
if you guys only knew the backstory, Rooney has more to do with this show than you would think, believe it or not.
Right. So it's an interesting one, because we hope to be able to see that being one of the great rivalries as this league continues to grow, and so does the culture around it. But for now, we wanted to be able to take the opportunity to once again thank you as the viewer for tuning into this episode 51 of the Rugby Rant podcast show. My name well, actually, I should be able to thank our sponsors one more time before we head out. So again, thanks to Tight Head Brewing, and thanks to Rugby Coffee, and thanks to the rugbyshop.com, and of course, Shop MLR, who they power. And make sure that you go and get all your merch from shopmlr.com as a rugby fan of Major League Rugby. Enjoy a cup of coffee while you do that from Rugby Coffee. And if it's not coffee, it's probably beer. So do that from the Tight Head guys out in Mundelein, Chicago. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt, Scott the Big Guy Ferrara, and of course, Phil Harris from Jacks Rangers. Thank you very much, and we will see you at the next.